we've all been saying is that like it feels like Euphoria in a way is like that high school friend for Gen Z that like you have to check in with every so often.
Is
like,
this what
have to
Barbie
check
Ferreira?
in. Yes.
Sorry, speaking of checking in, I just looked at. I haven't seen Barbie Ferreira in a long time, and I'm looking at pictures currently, and I'm
well, you don't know either, Kayla. Oh my god! So like
literally,
she
I
like
haven't seen her recently.
if GLP-1 was like a
person.
torpedo, she is
a direct hit. She suffered a direct hit, or she benefited from her direct hit, depending on how.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy.
She really looks radically different. Well,
yeah,
but I mean that's it, right? It's like this is our
good for her,
this is
but
our
also
new, visual lingo. Hip replacement. This is episode number 55. Kyle, you remember I Can't Drive 55 by the legendary Sammy Hagar, I'm sure.
I don't.
Oh my God.
I know what Sammy Hagar is, yes, but I do not.
The replacement singer of Van Halen had a solo career, including the smash hit I Can't Drive 55, which was
Can't Drive 55.
At a time when America was mostly 55 mile an hour speed limits, Sammy Hagar and his American muscle car could not handle it.
Sammy Hagar, what a guy! I'm sure. Yeah, what a guy. That's all I'll say.
So our guest is Kayla Suarez, and who's sort of looking at me bemusedly here. I wonder, Kayla, do you have any idea who Sammy Hagar is at all?
No, I don't, and I'm feeling left out. I'm getting FOMO. I'm like, who is this?
well, so part of it, fine. I think it's fine.
Well, part of the reason, okay, so look, Kyle, I'm going to ask you to explain who Kayla is per custom in a minute, but I will say one of the reasons that Sammy Hagar is on the brain for me, other than this being episode number 55, is that I just spent the weekend at college, at series producer Campbell's college, and I was there for a dad's weekend, and the playlists that his fraternity brothers made for the dad's weekend were music that I would have listened to at or before college. There was
did listen.
Well, it's kind of the same thing, right? Okay. It was sort of fair. Like there was certainly nothing made after 96, and most of it was pretty classic rock from the 70s and 80s, which I just thought was kind of remarkable. And so I guess, Kayla, one of the things we'll want to talk about is like, is that what the kids are listening to? Classic rock from the 70s and 80s?
Honestly, I would say yes, actually.
Really?
Actually, weird, yes. Right? Wait, do some of the, like, I'm so bad with, like, time. So, like, you'll say 70s or 80s, and I'm like, yes, I think so. But when you say those artists, do you mean, like, what is it called? Like, I don't know how to pronounce it. Like, Depeche Mode?
Depeche Mode.
That era?
No, I mean more like Aerosmith, AC/DC, Led Zeppelin, Pearl Jam.
Actually, yeah, no, I would say that's still in.
Yeah,
I would say that's still
interesting.
In. All right, well, Kyle, let's get to introducing our guest first, and then we'll get into the itemizing the musical choices of Gen Z.
Yes. So we're joined by Kayla Suarez, who is one half of Grown Kid, which is a social club and podcast, formerly of the podcast Teenage Therapy. She comes to us via Leanna Bad, who was a previous guest.
Of course.
Although I had Grown Kid on the list of people to approach, so it was a very like, oh, look at this, because like you guys have been doing really such cool stuff. Like you go viral every few months, and like I rarely have like FOMO of like, oh, I wish I could do this thing young people are doing, but the stuff that you guys do and it being like, this is only for 18 to 24-year-olds. Sorry, and I'm like, okay, well, I want to go to like wrestling speed dating and things like that. Like, could do the clothes swap. Like, I want to do this shit, but like, I get it. I understand.
Okay, so now my interest is piqued because I have to confess I'm not super familiar. And Kayla, off mic, you described how a previous project of yours, Teenage Therapy, had been sunsetted when you aged out of it. So is this like are you doing the sort of like Logan's Runification of media properties and providing planned obsolescence for each of them?
I would say that's giving me too much credit.
Okay.
I think
Fair enough.
yeah, so Gail and I, who Gail is my co-founder who also runs Grown Kid alongside me. We started a podcast when we were 15, and that was called Teenager Therapy. And that podcast was a weekly podcast where it was us, and then sorry, let me close my window because the noise.
Oh,
It's
good.
funny because we talked off mic about like leaving the camera for our video viewers, the psychopaths who watch this on Spotify. Are you crazy people?
We love them.
Anyway, so yeah, we do. We love you very much. Thank you for
Love.
checking in on my outfit each week. In any case, Kayla, please go ahead.
Yes, let me continue. So the podcast Teenager Therapy, that was a weekly podcast, and it was us and three other friends. And really what that was, it was basically like an online journal and diary of sorts. You know, we would meet weekly and just talk about our feelings, what we were feeling that week. And we would just have very raw and vulnerable conversations, sometimes a little bit too honest. There's like episodes still up to this day. It's like us crying and like fighting with each other and being like, you hurt my feelings, and you know,
My God.
all
Wow.
of that. And so it grew to be the largest like youth mental health podcast in the world. A part of that being
Wow.
like, especially during COVID and the pandemic, that's when we really hit our peak because a lot of people were, of course, staying in, they were feeling lonely. And so naturally they just gravitated towards teenager therapy. But once we were 20, we decided that we were sort of just outgrowing the brand. We didn't feel as aligned with it. We also had a lot of other like members of the podcast, you know, like go on and do their own things. And so it felt like the natural just progression to end the podcast instead of, you know, just keeping it going for whatever sake. So we ended that podcast, and then Gail and I, we started our own project, Grown Kid being one of them. And so we have been doing that together for the past almost year now. Yeah. So
Okay.
it's still a baby.
That is remarkable in general, but also like to have that sort of wherewithal at age 20 to be like, this brand doesn't align with my chakras anymore. Incredible. Because I feel like when I was 20, I was like fucking drinking, putting booze in any hole I could find, and like
So is
partying
you and your
doing a lot of
blackout
art.
rage gallon? Is that this is
Yeah,
another thing I learned
I
about
was
at college
crazy.
this week? Yeah. Okay.
Really,
Sorry.
rage
Don't get
gallon.
me wrong. It was a balance. It was a balance.
Yeah,
you know?
right.
Two can
Fair.
exist at the same time.
That's true. That's true. That's true. But also, I mean, it says a lot about Gen Z culture, like, you know, people who are in college now or who are going into college, that like you are able to have a property like this where you realize that, which was not when I was in college in the late 2000s. Like there wasn't really that dialogue in a way, unless you're like a small business owner, which like, sure.
Yeah, I think it's interesting actually. The whole idea of mental health as a discourse for people who aren't afflicted by what we would describe as mental illness is a new phenomenon, certainly within the last 15 years, probably within the last decade, and obviously brought into you know extreme focus by the pandemic. But I think you're right, Kyle. It's like the having the confidence and wherewithal to walk away from something successful because it's not serving you anymore is, you know, for any generation, that's not an easy
I was
thing
going to say,
do.
yeah,
So
that's hard
cool.
at any age.
Yeah, for sure.
So good job.
Thank you. Yeah,
Well,
this was also like we started the podcast before the like huge boom and surge of, you know, everybody having a podcast. Like every
Right.
influencer now is starting a podcast, which, you know, how many podcasts do we really need? How many perspectives do we need to hear?
as long as you hear this one, it's all good. Like,
yeah.
fine, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, very much that. Everything else can go, this one can stay.
Yes.
This one and yours.
So,
This one and
yes,
yours.
of course, yes. So yeah, we started that before it really blew up, and we're still doing it now through Grown Kid, but it's not our main focus. The social club definitely is.
Can I ask you? Sorry, speaking of that, sort of as a corollary to both of those things. Speaking of podcasts, I was listening to one of my favorites, How Long Gone, this morning, and Chris, who one of the hosts and who's a friend, said something that I really attribute to Gen Z language, and which I wonder if the two of you have a point of view on. He made some statement and then he ended it with I feel. So, sort of like, dogs are the cutest animals, I feel. That was not what Chris said, to be clear. He's on record as not loving dogs. But just the idea of instead of saying I think or it appears or such a thing, is the expression to state a belief or a fact is I feel. And until I heard Chris say it, I was really like, that's a thing that Gen Z says, but nobody else says. Or am I just the only one who notices that?
I haven't noticed that.
I'm curious in what settings are you hearing like an I feel statements? Is it like, yeah, I'm just curious what type of settings?
This is why it always struck me as a sort of a strange lingual turn or linguistic turn, where it would be like, eggs are the most popular food, I feel. Okay, you shouldn't feel that eggs are the most popular food. Like, eggs either are or they aren't. This is quantifiable, right?
Right.
Like, that's a fact, or that's a statement, not a feeling. But because and this is part of where it dovetails into this whole discussion around mental health and so on, is that it's sort of like we have brought therapy language or our internalization into everyday language in a way that I think is just sort of weird and sometimes not apropos. But I also wonder whether it's just me being diction police, grammar police, and shaking my fist at the clouds.
It might be that. But I also think it is interesting. I do think you're right, because putting it on the end of the sentence, it's like using like, it's like using sort of, like things like that. I feel it's this ever expanding universe of the thinking word.
Well, okay, so Kayla, I guess here's the question for the young people in the room in that case is like, one of the common complaints of people in my generation, and I sat around the table with a bunch of dads over the weekend and we talked about this a little bit, is the decoursification of young people. The idea that everybody's opinion in existence is valid, and therefore we have to treat everybody with a level of sort of distance or softness that ultimately rubs the edges off of everything, and it makes it hard to live what we would have experienced as real life when we were young people. And part of this idea of I feel is, if it's my feeling, then you can't question it as a valid statement, because I feel it whether you do or not. But I also think everything I just said is based on a kind of a truism, right? Young people are soft, old people are, coarse and callous, whatever else. Like, none of that is actually true. And I'm curious to hear your reflection on any of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point.
Yes, thank you.
I'm like, let me trap myself.
Opinion.
Yes, I think you bring up a lot of good points. One of them, as you were talking and you brought up yourself, is how common therapy speak now is. Everybody feels the need to, protect their peace. I got to put myself first. I don't want to cross anybody's boundaries. I don't want people to cross my boundaries. A lot of self-protection nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even saying something as casually as I feel, whether people realize it or not, is playing into that. I also think, how you briefly mentioned, a lot of people, I think especially Gen Z, lack confidence. And they lack self-assurance to just say plain statements and just leave it as is. And a big part of that is because there is so much controversy nowadays. There is a lot of divisiveness that sometimes saying a blanket statement as eggs are the most popular food, it's like, oh my gosh, somebody's going to get in an argument with me over this. And now I'm going to be called like a chicken hater, like this is going to get me canceled. And so I think
the chicken lobby will come for you for sure.
No, because they will. So using the languages of I think, I feel is just a way to dance around a subject almost. it's tiptoeing to let somebody know, oh, I agree with you, but I don't want to fully say that because then I have to think more about what it is that I'm talking about.
Right. You then have to think through all of the implications.
Yes.
Yeah,
So saying
that's
I feel, I
fascinating.
think is just an entry level way to just start a conversation and have that conversation without going deeper, really.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, Kyle, I'm a little surprised because this seems to be striking you all for the first time to some degree, and it feels like a discourse that you would be engaged in already.
I definitely think everything you said, Kayla, is exactly it. And I think that I hadn't necessarily thought about it that way. The thing that comes to mind to me is it plays into the idea of I feel and that sort of language that is maybe therapy speak, etc. I think about, and I wrote about this a few months ago, is like it ties into maybe a more like progressive leaning people's weaponizing of that to justify anything, which is something that it came out of a world of book people will not admit this, but they sort of set the foundation for this in a lot of ways. Is the people who like in the 2010s sort of memoir personal essay boom was really couched in that, where there's this idea of the emotional truth. It's not the literal truth, it's what you felt. And so then you could write or say anything. I was maligned, I was attacked, someone tried to kill. You could say whatever you want. And it can be put in a book or an essay or whatever. It doesn't need to be fact checked. It's your emotional truth. And that is like the flip side of the coin of Trump being like, well, it's my alternative facts. Like it's like you're dialoguing in a way that's like it's not actually real, or like you're inviting flexibility in a way just so that you won't be held accountable. So almost in a way it's the flip side of what you said, Kayla, but like they go hand in hand. Like on one hand, the like I feel is a very soft version, the emotional truth and alternative facts like the more extreme version of it, where it's trying to like totally escape any culpability, but they're doing the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point too, that yeah, when somebody uses their emotions as the statement, it's hard to argue against that because to the person that is the objective truth, to everybody else that's subjective, but you can't argue with somebody that's their own lived experience. You know, it's like, okay, well, they're always going to use the feelings and emotions as that argument.
Well, I mean, you can argue with it if you want to come across as a callous dickhead who loses the argument. Like which is, you know, a position that I find myself in more often than I'd like, but also like it's just that's the thing that I struggle with in those instances is that, you know, you're right. And emotional truth may be one that you hold dear. And your personal truth may be one that is truer for you than it is for me. But at a certain point, we cross a line of actual objectivity, and it I don't know, like, but and Kyle, I really appreciate you bringing up President Trump as a sort of a counterbalance to that, because you're right, is doing the same exact thing. It's like,
absolutely,
yeah. We live in a crazy world, which I created, which explains why I got shot at this weekend, which explains why I'm not scared, because I created the world, because we live in a crazy world. It's just like, bro, quit it.
Yes.
Wish that guy would just quit it. Anyway.
So among other things, but that's okay.
We're waiting.
Yeah, we're waiting for that day.
Yeah. All right.
Force
well,
quit.
we should get into the topics. What's first up, Kyle? What do we got to
so
debate?
Here's an interesting
Kayla
one.
Here.
Yeah, we'll start from the top end. Because there was a story, I believe, a story from, I believe it was Vanessa Friedman at the New York Times, who basically did a trend piece about how older women are appearing on more and more runways, which is true. I think that's definitely something that I think we probably all have noticed probably in the past decade. But it's interesting that amidst, it's interesting that amidst larger quote unquote like dissolutions of DEI and diversity and things like that, and just difference in general, that the older woman in fashion continues. And that is something that, like, you know, there might be rollbacks on, you know, queer bodies, on bodies, non-white bodies, on, you know, people of different abilities, et cetera, on the runway. but age has still existed as a part of that conversation, which I think is really interesting in general. And I think it says I have a lot of thoughts on this, but like it says a lot. But I'm curious, is this something that you all have noticed? What do you think, and why is it happening? Perhaps,
Kayla, I'm gonna jump in first because I want to then take my response and add more to the question for you. So, to me, this is two things, right? One is a reflection of who actually buys the products and trying to address an aging population, of which I consider myself part, just to be very clear here, who still wants to be engaged with fashion culture, the current moment, in a way that is very active and very participatory, and needs a level of validation that we, since we have not perceived ourselves getting older, don't want to perceive ourselves purely as trying to recreate our youth. And then, but secondly, Kayla, I wonder that, as a young person, do you look at those female bodies in particular in those instances and go, she looks great, I want to look like that, or I want to buy that,
clock that?
Or alternately, is it right? Or alternately, do you go, hey, that's for old people shit? Or alternately, do you go, do you not even notice it? So sorry, Kayla, floor is yours.
Yes. Before this, I didn't hear much about this topic, not gonna lie. So when I first saw the article, that was the first time that I had seen it, and I thought it was super interesting. While I thought it was interesting, a part of me also felt that even though these women are older and that is breaking the norm in its own way, it still is, they are still like runway models. They are still thin, they're still fit, they're still, you can tell that they're aged well. And so in that way, I personally still felt some detachment in a way. To me, that it didn't feel as new as it probably should have, I think. That being said, though, I do think that I was thinking about this, and I think obviously now plastic surgery, Ozempic, weight loss drugs, all of that, looks maxing, that entire sphere, everybody is trying to look their absolute best at all times, and everybody's trying to look their youngest by any means. And so I think it is a nice stance to see, regardless of the other aspects when it comes to modeling. It is nice to see a visible difference against that. There, at a certain point when you age, there's only so much Botox can do. Like you're going to see a line or two, babe, and that's totally okay. And so I part of me did appreciate the fact that, yes, okay, there are wrinkles on their face. That being said, though, it felt a little bit too easy for me, I think.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, I think that gets to Kyle, your comment about, as other, if the introduction of older models was a part of trying to give credit to or give space to quote unquote marginalized groups, the fact that the aged models who fit the phenotype have remained still while others have lessened in their presence is, it says something, right? Which is ultimately like what fashion people want is for clothes hangers, not for inclusivity.
Absolutely. And that to me is the other thing, is like, I think to your point earlier, Ben, is like, yeah, they have money. Like, this is like, these are talking to people like, the one-to-one. It's like, who has money now? Obviously the older woman shopper, quote unquote, versus the younger woman shopper. She doesn't have the money, so I'm not going to play to her. Fashion is a business. They're clearly playing that game. But the other thing that I think, to me, like my first reaction to it that I find fascinating, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's a kernel of truth to this in it, is like, look, in the world of, like, as you said, Kayla, like looks maxing and people looking to look their best and seem as young as possible. Like Kris Jenner's deep plane facelift last year broke the internet for a reason, because everybody, like, it was a source of a fountain of youth.
Well, she finally looks 70. Thank goodness. Yeah, right?
They'd all settled. But anyway, but like that was such a major moment in a way that I think like like everybody heard about that somehow. Yeah. Anyway, but like, to me, it sort of, and this is a very cynical take, is that it's like, it's this soft transgressiveness of like, we are putting the old body, the old crone out there because like this is not someone you would ever think is pretty, and we are saying she's pretty. It's almost like, saying, when you watch The Substance, like the older woman is the enemy in a way, and it's like, well, we're putting her out there because we love this freak and she's gonna freak you out, and it's like, okay, well, that's fucked up. But that's, to me, is like, it's dialoguing with that, is that like, in the age of trying to be ageless, let's put someone who is closer to not being a, you know what I mean? So it's like,
but is that for cultural capital, do you think? I mean, they're points maxing the
I think it's for shock value. I think it's
interesting. Okay.
Subversively shock value is like, oh my god, this old lady is wearing something sexy. Like it's that sort of thing. It's like, and I don't think people are talking about it in the same way that nobody talked about Madonna wearing the corset from 20 years ago at Coachella. Like nobody, that conversation didn't happen.
Well, that was because she fell down, and we were just concerned about whether she could get up or not. That was
she did.
All right, we're calling back to a conversation from last week. Kayla, I'm curious. What part of what Kyle brings up is this whole notion of, there is an inextricable link to the K-shaped economy in these discussions, right? Like if what we are doing is pandering to the people who actually buy the clothes, aka those who have accumulated wealth over the course of a longer life, then that means part of what the aspirational participation in that economy is that young people have to pick and choose their shots so that they can have a piece rather than the collection, right? They need to shop fewer and better rather than more and everything. What I guess I always wonder with young people is like, is it true that your cohort, right? It doesn't have to be you specifically, but your cohort is looking for, all right, I am going to find that one thing that really signifies my participation in an aspirational market, and then I'm going to fill in with Uniqlo and Zara and Shein and whatever? Or is it alternately like, I'm not doing this at all? Or is it, I'm doing all Uniqlo because it's shit, Claire White Keller is designing it anyway, so we might as well. By the way, I just bought a whole slew of the Jonathan Anderson Uniqlo polos, and they're sensational. So anyway, no product plug here, but Uniqlo
No, never.
Uniqlo
right.
sponsor the pod. Anyway, sorry, Kayla, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, the conversation around consumer practices, specifically around Gen Z, I also think is very different because we're broke. Like how does one say that? Like how does one say that? And so I honestly think for majority of Gen Z, the thought of purchasing a runway item is not even in the forefront of our minds. We're trying to find a job or pay our rent, pay our bills. I think purchasing a designer luxury item is probably not one of the main priorities. And I think that's one of the reasons why fast fashion is now so popular. Brands like Shein, Fashion Nova, Boohoo, all of those brands, they're cheap. And so they're cheap, they produce fast, they ship fast. And so to people, it's just so readily available. And especially when you see on your phone, at least, a bunch of influencers promoting the same type of brands that are promoting these fast fashion pieces, people in their heads like, oh, this is trending, this is cheap, I will just buy this. The thought of buying long lasting quality pieces is most likely not their first priority. People are looking for something that is easy on the credit card, I would say.
Yeah. Can I just push on that a little bit? Because I hear that, and I hear the economic reality. I also had a conversation this morning or early this afternoon with a friend of the show who shall remain nameless, but who made a joke about not being able to ever afford a house. And I said, well, you get into these domestic partnerships and you combine assets, and all of a sudden it becomes easier to save, and suddenly you have a down payment. And I I know that's an oversimplification, but it's also the way I literally experienced it with my wife. And his response was like, yeah, but the problem is that I'm addicted to buying vintage Armani linens. And so I can't save any money. And I was like, well, I have an idea for you then.
What if you don't do this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess, which is, and again, I both recognize this condition in myself and also love this particular person, and so I'm not going to put him on blast. But the thing that I thought was interesting about that was just like the fundamental struggle of describing the economic reality that you're talking about, and then also the need to participate and be a part of this discourse. And I guess my original question was driven by the idea that it feels like, as much as the Shein thing was the default, it's maybe less so now. And I don't know, maybe that's where I sit from my privileged position, or maybe it's actually true. And so I just wonder if you'd
I mean, I think the idea of like, I hear a lot of people with this mindset of, I am so in debt, I don't have a job, I need a sweet treat. You know, like the sweet treat epidemic. In this case, it's vintage Armani exchange. And so different price points, I would say. But
for sure.
Yeah, for sure. But I think in this case, even just thinking about like what you said previously of planning long term for like a house or even a brand new car, I think for a lot of Gen Z, it seems it's just so far-fetched and so far away and almost basically unattainable that savings are just, that's not real to a lot of young people. You know, it's like, to them that's not an option, because they don't have money to save, or the money that they would save, they are also looking for, you know, happiness through just consumerism, which is totally valid. You know, like, unemployed and broke people also deserve happiness. Hello. That's, you know, like, I think
not only that, if the unemployed are not given happiness at some point or another, and I don't mean that in a broad sort of like social welfare standpoint, but if everybody doesn't have some degree of satisfaction and happiness, we're all in trouble, because it creates unrest at every level.
Yes, 1,000%. And I also think that you guys bring up a good point too, of there is definitely a new wave of having the most vintage piece, the resellers, the thrifting of it all, especially, I mean, I live here in Bushwick, so I am very familiar with it. So that's a good point that is brought up. I also think I think as a whole, there was a point where it was the extreme end of, yes, it is the whole Shein, Fashion Nova, fast fashion. And I think it had reached a little bit too extreme, that it's now reaching the other way of where people are trying to be as unique and individualistic as possible. But at the same time, it falls into its own subgenre of like thrifting and vintage designer, that whole sphere. Though it is a bit pricier, it does signal more individualism. But even then, it's at what cost? Like, when you're buying this vintage Armani exchange piece, are you buying that for yourself or for recognition that you have a vintage Armani piece? If that makes sense. So
I will ask. I will put the question out and find out what that is. And I will further remind that person that, you know, one less pair of pants means, you know, one more potential mortgage payment. I mean, probably not a mortgage payment. That's probably that's excessive. All right. Well, fine. Fair enough. What do we got next, Kyle?
Hassan Piker.
I've heard of him. Who he is? I've heard of him.
Right.
Yes.
You have.
Yes.
You know. Okay. Which
were you really asking me if I knew who Hassan Piker was?
Yeah, I don't know.
That is fair. There are plenty of things on this podcast that I have just badly missed.
Both directions, because I looked him up. I was like, how old is he? And he's like actually more solidly millennial than I thought. He's born in 91. I was like, oh, you're older than I thought. Good for him. Anyway,
it makes me fun. Yeah,
he's
I can't even tell you how old that makes me feel. But anyway, that's
Well, fair. Fair. So there was like a poll that went out to, I guess it was a mixed age group. I actually don't know. But it went viral last week because the poll was basically like, what do you think of Hassan Piker? Do you think of him favorably or unfavorably? And it was like 7% thought favorably, 3 thought unfavorably. The rest were like, who is Hassan Piker? So that was really interesting in that, like, this person who I think the media, or I would assume since we all know who he is, the media is really pushing as sort of like a voice of the new political left in a way. He's getting so much attention for that, and yet real people, no idea who he is. Or
well,
like, it's not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to ask, and was this relative to the conversation that he and Gia Tolentino had with the New York Times about, in which the headline was micro looting? This is the term that was used, micro looting, which is like not scanning things at Whole Foods and putting them in the bag.
Right.
Was deemed as not only an acceptable practice, but somehow desirable as an act of rebellion against our corporate overlord. Well, whatever. So Gia Tolentino got pilloried for this, and part of it was that as a member of the media elite, she's got a lot of haters, right? Like that makes sense as a thing. But I wonder. I mean, Kayla, to the point of only 10% of the population knowing who Hassan Piker is, and him being a media fascination in many circles. Like, in your cohort, is he, Elvis level recognition, or he is kind of a niche concern, or he's like, I don't know what everybody's favorite.
Is anybody talking about him? I feel like he comes up in conversations like this. It's like, sure, but like, are people actually talking about him?
Yeah, I mean, I know who Hassan Piker is. Most people my age know who he is, though I don't know if they're actually avid watchers of his, like they're sitting down to his streams and, liking and reacting. I think most of the content that we're consuming, me and like the people I know, is mainly through like X or Twitter, not Twitter,
Same.
X. These short clips. Yeah, Twitter. Short clips and just short consumption of him. But besides that, yeah, not really. It is interesting though, because he seems like such a huge political persona that I would have assumed that a lot of people know about him in real life, because I'm pretty sure he's also been on like mainstream media as well. Like he's done interviews with mainstream media.
He definitely has. I mean, I'm not a Joe Rogan I'm not a Joe Rogan listener at all, really. But I wonder whether he's been on Rogan. I'd imagine he probably has at some point or another. It really speaks to the atomization of the current culture and media landscape, that you can get Hassan Piker. This statistic reminds me a lot of gaming, where gaming as a whole is by far the most popular form of entertainment in the world, much larger than the music industry, the television industry, the film industry, all put together. And yet the biggest game streamers, so on and so forth, I would imagine probably achieve a level of name recognition right around that kind of 10% mark, right? That you would get. Does my father, case in point, know about Grand Theft Auto? Maybe. Partially because the title is Grand Theft Auto and there's something scary to it. Does he know about Elden Rings? Definitely not. Does he know about League of Legends, this like incredible global phenomenon? Definitely not. And so it is interesting to think that these properties, which are gigantic, or personalities which are gigantic, are just,
I think
in many respects.
For sure. It also makes me think of the Jubilee and cut videos of like the very reactionary videos of like one conservative versus 20 liberals, or like vegans versus non-vegans. And I often question, who is watching this? Like who are actual consumers of this? Because I think, though I myself don't know many people that really consistently watch these types of videos, I feel the effects of the videos that they've had, like the very extremism of it all. And so I guess thinking about Hassan Piker, of who, in that case, like the statistics showing not many people in real life actually know of him, it makes me think of the same about like other reactionary channels, or
Absolutely.
even just influencers of like, well then who
Mm-hmm.
there's clearly a disconnect here.
I think there's two things happening. I think one, which I think we all sort of know and acknowledge and are speaking to, is like the lack of media imagination. Even the same with like Jubilee. It's like those videos, like Hassan Piker, like even like, you know, I've Had It and Jennifer Welch and even Joe Rogan and certain Theo Von, people like that, they get sucked into like the media's vocabulary of 5 people. Like they don't have object permanence. It's like, or they have way too extreme object permanence, or they can only talk about 5 people. They don't have the imagination to talk about more people and more diverse voices, whatever that may be. Like that is, I think, part of the problem. The other part, to the point of seeing his stuff on Twitter, is like the whole clipping economy, which is also having a moment talking about like Nick Fuentes and Clavicular and Hassan Piker, who I think there was a stat going
and Geese, for that matter.
Yeah, exactly. But like that is like, I'm forgetting who put this out, but there was a really good chart of like, you know, viewership of clips versus the actual streams for these people, and like it's astronomically different. Like and Hassan Piker, I didn't realize, is apparently like the most, he gets the most views out of anybody as far as the clips. And like that to me again is like part of the same thing, is like I don't think the clips are breaching containment. Like they might be getting a lot of views, same like these Jubilee videos, like you said, Kayla, but I think they're hitting these same people. Like I don't think they're hitting my mom. I think they're only probably hitting like, you know, your feed and my feed, maybe your feed, Ben, but like it's you have to be there sort of thing. And like it's not breaking out. There's not a story in New York Times next week or whatever. Like it just is, you have to be very online for it. And I think that's the reality. And oftentimes that really paints like, well, that's all of culture. It's like, that's not true. Go outside and talk to people.
That makes me, I mean, look, to that end, the ironic thing, right, and especially when we look at our current president, is that the most maligned or most marginalized form of media going forward, broadcast television, is actually the one that becomes most effective in building consensus awareness, because it's the one that isn't algorithmically optimized away from or towards certain groups, right? But what it also makes me wonder, Kayla, is like, if you thought of somebody who is like culturally monolithic for your peers, age peers, who would that be? And that can be across any sphere. It could be music, could be entertainment, could be politics, could be fashion, could be whatever it is. But like somebody who everybody knows. I have one.
And actually watches or knows? Because I think that's an important distinction. Or both.
I mean, let's let Kayla answer the question, and then we can dive into that, because I think that's an interesting variable for sure.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I was actually recently talking about this with my friends, especially after the Coachella performance that Justin Bieber did. We got to talking just about pop stars nowadays and who is, you know, the boy pop star, like the one that like people are fainting over and like concerts are being sold out. Like the effect that Justin Bieber had when he was at his peak, you know, like when he was at his peak, everybody knew like, oh yeah, Justin Bieber, that's like the main one. Or when One Direction was popular. It feels like back then there were these statement artists that everybody knew, but now it seems like there's just so much being put out now when it comes to, like, if we want to talk about specifically music in this case, everybody's making music. And it's so hard to stand out now as the main pop star. And so I definitely think Justin Bieber at the time was like, he was that person. And I guess even now you can say that he is relevant to this day, though I don't think his pull is the same or his effect is the same. I think it's very different. It's matured, of course, obviously.
Yeah.
So I guess, okay, let me think of somebody or something that everybody would know.
I don't want to put words in your mouth here, but the one that comes immediately to mind to me is Kanye.
Mm.
And that that has interesting implications because of his, I mean, because of all of his public and private, foibles, said politely, as well, but also his dips into other mediums, other spheres, other areas of participation, everything from reality television to architecture to running for president, right? And it makes you sort of wonder in the future, are the only people that are going to be able to touch multiple areas of culture the ones that, Kyle, to your point, break containment and can be known across these multiple spheres? Like, are we destined for President Camacho of Idiocracy because getting famous in that way is the only way to actually build consensus?
Right. I was going to say, do you not think that it's a Kardashian? Like, I feel like Kim Kardashian maybe occupies a bigger space than Kanye, because I do think if we're also like, thinking intersectionally about it, like, I do think, for lack of better words, when you think of the, like, white people maybe in the South, I've been overgeneralizing, like, rap, I'm not listening to that. And like, oh, this is a black celebrity, not listening to that. But you have someone like Kim, and like, this is not credit to her, this is the opposite, is like, she is occupying all of those territories by, blackfishing and appropriation, all this stuff. She has somehow made herself every woman, every race at all times. So like that, I think she could, I want to say that, but I also think Kylie, I don't know, maybe
All right, Kayla, break the tie
Kim.
here. What do you think? What do you think?
Yeah, I think I hate to say this, Kyle. I think you make I think you make a good point with the Kim Kardashian. I, for some reason, completely forgot about her. Like,
well, which is
literally,
probably a good thing. Good.
What about her ex-husband?
Right. I mean, I guess hand in hand. I think no, I would say.
But like, are young people talking? Like, are people talking about Kanye anymore? I feel like people are still talking about Kim. I think that's the difference in a way.
Okay, I think Kim is always being talked about. There's never a time where she's not being talked about. I feel like she's always doing something, and even if she's not doing something, she's just being talked about. And I think a big part of that is because she's been on television for decades now. Like, it's been, she always has a presence, even when she's not exactly online or sharing things. I think with Kanye, I think he has peaks where he is most talked about.
That's true.
Without a doubt. Right? That is, I think, clinically true.
Right.
But I think Kim Kardashian has the overall aura and effect. Okay. I will also say, I don't know if you guys know this show, and maybe I don't think this is I don't think the show's nowhere near as big as Kim Kardashian or Kanye West, but Euphoria, dare I say.
Right.
Have you guys heard of it?
I think not only have we heard about it, I had a long conversation with my son and his roommate over the weekend about Euphoria, because they just started watching season 1, apparently having never seen it, and had a lot of critiques about the level of reality that was being portrayed, or so on and so forth. And I was kind of describing fright watching it. Like, when my son was 14, I think the first season came out, and I was, sort of watching it going like, okay, this is my son's high school peers. Great. This is not, I don't love this idea. And he turned out fine, obviously. And my daughter's turned out fine too. But anyway, sorry, you were saying about Euphoria. What was the
yes. I mean, you bring up a lot of good points, and maybe Euphoria is just more so mainstream for Gen Z rather than across all generations. Definitely, I think it's one of those shows that it grew up with Gen Z. So in a way, it feels so
interesting.
Yeah. Because like you said, like 14 to now, like 18. It's been like 4 years, I think, across like the span of when they started to now. So you can think of it as like freshman in high school to being a senior, or like a freshman in college to now graduating. It's like you have seen this show throughout your transformative periods and times of your life that like I know with the new season, it's definitely like respiked just the nostalgia, but also, yes, like you said, Ben, the craziness of like what? But I think is it super realistic? Maybe not, but I think it plays on core storylines of most people's lives. You know,
Yeah.
like having a best friend that gets with your ex and then they get married when they're like super young, straight out of high school. You know, it's like it follows similar tropes that are so familiar, but
Very universal, yeah.
in a very exaggerated way, of course. Yes,
Okay,
Kyle.
so this I've been thinking about this for weeks now, and I now have somebody to ask. Are people actually watching this season of Euphoria? Because like I'm not hearing as much noise. Number one, this weekend I feel like I did hear some, but it was a lot. If I hear anything, it's more coming from a place of like a hate watch. Like I don't think anybody's enjoying it. Like, and I think for a lot of reasons. But like I'm curious, like are to exactly to what you said, like are people talking about it? Like industry when that was going, everybody across every demographic I was hearing from. Euphoria, no. So like I'm curious.
Okay, that's interesting because every Sunday, Euphoria has been trending on my Twitter page. It's like the
Interesting.
number one trending thing. Like, it's like Euphoria Sundays, and I'm seeing like the clips
Okay.
already being pulled. I basically see the whole episode on my timeline. And so that's interesting because I think people are still watching. I don't think it's as like I don't think it's as popular. People feel that same like excitement,
Right.
but people are definitely still talking about it, and the hate watch is definitely true. Everybody's hating on like I think more so than the show, they hate on the actors as well. They hate
Absolutely.
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
pretty much
Of course.
anything.
Sam.
Um
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
it's. I have a feeling it's one of those shows that actually will age well in the canon.
Really?
Yeah, I do. Because
Okay.
I think it,
All right.
and especially based on what Kyle is saying, I think that it provides a kind of cultural signpost. And it's funny, right? Like
Sure.
when
Yeah.
I was a teenager, Less Than Zero came out, and as a kid in Syracuse, hearing about people my age who were supposedly driving Ferraris and snorting cocaine and going out to nightclubs and being in, bisexual three-ways and whatever, I was just like, this is totally invented. This is not real. Like, doesn't exist. Now, the fact of the matter is that it does somewhere in some small pocket, but that became a sort of a cultural signpost that helped us to identify where we were on a cultural continuum. And I have a feeling that it does that. The danger will be if the storyline gets too extreme. And I would argue, from what I've seen of this season, we are approaching that point where it devolves into satire and it ceases to be like a representative thing and starts to just be a goof, like what can we
Yes.
get away with kind of thing.
For sure. I think something that I've also been hearing a lot about with the new season is how different Maddie and Jules look. I forget their actor names. What are their actor names?
Maddie.
Who's
Oh,
Maddie?
yep.
Literally, oh my gosh, this makes me feel like so out of touch.
Jules is Hunter Schafer.
Yes.
Maddie is
Alexa Demi, right?
Yes,
There we
Alexa
go.
Demi.
Yes.
Yes, I completely
That
blinked.
just came to me.
Yeah, it's like a dream. But yeah, I was hearing a lot of discourse around how their looks have changed because they have lost so much weight. I mean, season 1 and season 2, they looked fine. Like they looked completely, they were already within standard. And I was hearing just a lot of discourse around how starkingly thin they look now. And I thought it was it was just an interesting conversation because I was seeing
Mm-hmm.
a lot of praise for like, oh my gosh, like she looks so good. Like, I'm so happy to have her on my screen. Like, she looks so beautiful. The other part being like, this is a little bit jarring and scary, and this should not be the standard. When you look at season 1 and season 2, like there was nothing to compare to. And so that was also very interesting to see how they have changed on the actor side.
Right.
Well, it's another evidence of our K-shaped world, right? It's like who the GLP-1 haves and the GLP-1 have-nots, right?
I mean, the other extreme person in that group, I actually haven't heard anybody talk about her yet with the show. I didn't even know she's in it yet. Barbie Ferreira. Like, she is a total other version of herself, having had, storylines about her body type at the time, and now that is far from her truth anymore. But like, all this to say too is like, one thing that came to mind and kind of gets at all of what we've all been saying is that, like, it feels like Euphoria in a way is like that high school friend for Gen Z that, like, you have to check in with every so often.
Is
like,
this what
I have
Barbie
to check
Ferreira?
in. Yes.
Sorry, speaking of checking in, I just looked at. I haven't seen Barbie Ferreira in a long time, and I'm looking at pictures currently, and I'm
well, you don't know either, Kayla? Oh my god! So like,
Literally,
she's
I
like,
haven't seen her recently.
if GLP-1 was like a torpedo, she is
a direct hit. She suffered a direct hit, or she benefited from her direct hit, depending on how.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy.
She really looks radically different. Well,
yeah,
but I mean, that's it, right? It's like, this is our
good for her.
This is
but
our
also,
new, visual lingo. Crazy indeed. All right, well, guys, this has been really fun. Kayla, we got to have you back, and maybe we'll do a Euphoria season recap.
Yeah.
Like yes, I actually would love that.
See how that resonates. But in the meantime, where can the people find you when they're not listening to this episode on repeat for all its many pearls of wisdom?
Yes, keep streaming on repeat. I on Instagram _Kayla Suarez. Follow my social club at Grown Kid on Instagram, and on YouTube it's just Grown Kid.
Got it.
Listen to our podcast.
Sorry to interrupt you. Can people come out and participate in the Grown Kid experience if they're between the ages of 18 and 24?
Yes, of course. Thank you for the segue, Ben. Yes, so for Grown Kid, we host weekly events. And so if you're in the New York area and you want to join us, please do. Don't just watch us, join us. We host weekly events. So
awesome. All right. Well, speaking of weekly events, we will be back with another episode of Hip Replacement next week. But Kyle, in the meantime, great to talk to you. And Kayla, this has been really fun. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. I enjoyed myself.
Amazing. Thank you.
All right, y'all. Talk soon.
Bye.